I'd like to start with a piece of musical history, not just because I can sing, and I do love to sing, but because it sets the context for how remembrance is acknowledged in India today. श्रीमद् यदुकुलवारिधि राकाचन्द्रं सुशील गुणसान्द्रं राकाचन्द्रं सुशील गुणसान्द्रं जय चामराजभूपं रक्षतु सततम् कृपानिधि कृष्णः कृपानिधि कृष्णः श्रीमद् यदुकुलवारिधि राकाचन्द्रं सुशील गुणसान्द्रं गुणसान्द्रम्. Thank you. This piece of musical history also sort of embodies and represents the way in which we have conventionally remembered the legacy of the Maharajas. In some ways, we have been very stuck to one model of looking and remembering the Maharajas and their legacies. And also, perhaps, it wouldn't be wrong to say that we have been very comfortable remembering and celebrating their legacies in the realm of music, arts, and culture. But Mysorean legacies have really not attained what I call escape velocity from this self-collapsing bubble of the Mysorean private affairs, which in very intimate circles do cherish what it means to be a Mysorean and its significance for not just what was princely Mysore, but contemporary India today even. But still, there is a great dearth for literature, for mainstream conversations about what the Mysorean legacy gave contemporary India. And I'm sort of, in the context of the book, Yaduveer, this book comes 48 years after the Punyatithi of your grandfather and 2 generations later. And so I respectfully place this book in the context of changing 2 great conversations. One is the modern perception of the princes in India. It's the stench of colonial imperfections, so to speak, still continues to sort of color our perceptions on how we view the princes. History has often asked the question, why should we be bothered about these men who were free under colonial siege? Most of the princes were thought of as vain characters who lived languid lives in very colorful corridors, and that their political clout, will, and influence neither changed their destinies for their own princely kingdoms, nor did they have any impact in the larger global dynamic at large. So, how do you see, and as the torchbearer of the royal house of Mysore, how do you place your legacy into the future, and how do you intend to take this forward?
Thank you. Thank you, Deepti. Firstly, before I answer your question, just wanted to wish everyone a very good evening. It's truly a privilege to be here at the Bangalore Literature Festival, and of course, Deepti with the book, and finally, I think long overdue, that somebody had a biography of His Highness Yaduveer Wadiyar, because I think he gets lost in the shadow sometimes of his very illustrious uncle, Nalvadi Krishna Wadiyar. And his time, of course, very brief compared to his uncle, was still very profound in many ways in shaping what became the Mysore state after independence and then contributing towards Karnataka today. So I think that book does great justice to that life, and of course the transitions, many transitions he had to face in his life as well. So once again, thank you all for having me here. As far as the legacy going forward, it's pretty straightforward and pretty simple. Mysore, singularly, the thing which we hold on to is pretty much the tradition, and it revolves around what is the sampradaya at the palace. And essentially, we are custodians to that, and that is the foremost duty of taking forward. The rest, the administration, everything else to do with came with the post of what was monarchy before, is all been handed over since independence, and then completely all of the privileges were removed, of course, in 72. So our legacy, suppose upholding the legacy, will be essentially upholding that tradition, that sampradaya of the Mysore Palace. Alongside that, of course, there is a great expectation due to what I would say, a lot of the goodwill that the family has garnered over the many years of service. And we continue to always not take that for granted and continue to be a part of society in any which way, such as programs like this, and interact and be a part of society as a whole. And the legacy, what we inherited, we have always believed is joint custodianship, not just us. It's equally important that everybody participate and have their 2 cents in towards preserving that heritage as well. So that's how I view taking this legacy forward. That is a joint effort from everyone. And of course, we will have to play the role of continuing the tradition, but all the time with the support and input from everyone around us.
Thank you. The Maharaja is arguably the modern architect of what we come to understand as the Bangalore ethos today. Yet, there is very little of legacy making surrounding that today. For example, for all those of you who may not know, the HAL is not here in Bengaluru through any other stroke of luck or accident. The Hindustan Aircraft Company was actually founded by Maharaja Jaichamarajendra Wadiyar in conjunction, and his government in conjunction with Walchand Hirachand and William Pawley, an aeronautical entrepreneur himself. And so if HAL had not come to Bangalore, there wouldn't be the public sector boom that Bangalore enjoyed in the 1980s and the 1990s. And if Bangalore today is the educational capital today, with the Indian Institute of Science and several other institutes of national importance thriving in the Bengaluru educational sector today, it is simply because of both the political will and contributions of the Maharajas. Thank you. Let's talk about the National Tuberculosis Institute, the Raman Research Institute. With IISc came a bunch of scientists who were hobnobbing their presences at IISc. And then with Raman's wish that there be an institute that would celebrate his own scientific legacy, came the Raman Research Institute to Bangalore. And for all those of you who may not know, there are many localities of Bangalore, many roads in Bangalore which are dedicated to the Maharaja's vision of what urban planning should be. Can anybody name 2 layouts in Bangalore which were named after the Maharaja? There's one more. Yeah, JC Road, yep. Huh? Yep, you got it. And a little known fact is that the Maharaja was the first chairman of the Indian Wildlife Board. So what we see as the Indian Wildlife Act, which was literally pushed through the Indian cabinet by the only man in the Indian cabinet, Srimati Indira Gandhi, some of the formulations, some of the ideations, and some of the basis to the Indian Wildlife Act was actually done at the Mysore Palace with Yaduveer's grandfather at the helm of things. And due to his recommendations, as part of these meetings, 2 sanctuaries were created, the Gir Sanctuary and the Chandraprabha Sanctuary in India today. So Mysore also has had a long-lasting record of fantastic conservation policies, absolutely far-reaching sustainable development goals. So the legacy of which you also inherit. From knowing you and your outreach programs, sustainability, governance, and education seem to be some of your pet interests. So how do you see the legacy and the policies of the Maharaja stepping into the future? And if he was alive here today, what would have been his SDGs, so to speak?
Thank you. So, I mean, the 3 sort of sustainability, education, and these other areas which I focus on, the reasons we focus is, of course, for today's issues. But as sort of I came to this responsibility and then started to uncover more of my grandfather's time, and then even the entire Mysore legacy, in many ways you see a lot of echoes of what policy we should be taking today, having at least given some attention to, and in many cases implemented during the erstwhile state of Mysore. Case in point, of course, as you have mentioned in your book, the 5-year plans of during when my grandfather's reign started in 1940 and then subsequently later. Many which ways they had paid a lot of attention to the huge strain caused in part because of the Second World War, but also the many industries that were set up prior were causing huge strain on the resources, especially the forest, be it water or any of our natural resources. So many of the 5-year plans stress the point that whatever new industries or whatever new initiatives may be taken up should always look to be regenerative and look to push back on the requirement, or rather have regeneration within the forest and find out means by which we can get better water usage, etc., and sustainable in those areas as well. So probably you can draw inspiration from the fact that we've been trying this long, or maybe this so long ago, before we understood that we were planetary stewards, or essentially the West thinks of itself as being planetary stewards only in the 1960s. So well before that time, maybe in part because of his knowledge of our civilizational values, etc., him and his government in the 40s itself conceived of this idea of sustainability. So it gives you, I suppose, in many ways inspiration that we can reconnect with these ideas, and also in many ways a path which is a hybrid, truly a hybrid, in the sense that we cannot take everything and draw everything from the West. We take what is good from there and incorporate with what is good from our tradition itself. So those 2 things, I think, is what you can clearly draw inspiration from him, because through all his policy and his the rules that came up at that time towards sustainability, the thread of what Indic thought is always there. So I think those are what you could draw inspiration from towards setting up for today. And I think the clear picture or the clear inspiration you draw from everything else is he is setting up for the future. Not, he's honoring the past, giving it its due regard, but all of his efforts are towards building for the future, building for tomorrow. And I think that is the key aspect which we need to look at today is, give the past its due regard, but build for tomorrow, and understand that whatever we are utilizing today doesn't belong to us, but to the future and to our next generation. I think that is something you can clearly draw on from his work.
Thank you. The Maharaja was a polymath, a pianist, a composer of Carnatic music, wrote over 18 essays on the Advaita Vedanta, toured the globe extensively as a cultural ambassador, was interested in philately, and was a damn good shot with the gun, as he was with music. So, still, in today's era, in the backdrop of, we've come from the era of singing God Save the King to the era of the abolition of privy purses and the titles. And we live in a new milieu where exponential technologies and globalizations are really changing the meanings and metaphors with which we can hold these legacies. And there still seems to be a scorning snigger here and there to really view the princes or people like the people who were so multifaceted as the Maharaja, sometimes his own cultural and musical enterprise is pandered with. There's always that snigger that maybe the Maharaja himself did not write those compositions and that an unroyal courtier actually penned it for him or ghost wrote it for him. So can you talk a little bit about changing the perception game, because that's what the book is all about. And after so many years of Mysore's long-standing presence in India, the Wadiyar dynasty itself has outlasted many, many dynasties in South India and India at large. It's perhaps the most longest surviving and thriving dynasty in India. And many of the scholars, many of the kings in this dynasty were scholars, they were polymaths, they were multifaceted geniuses, they wrote and sang and thought and researched and contributed avidly to culture and Indian knowledge systems, not from a distance, but by actually getting into the arena and getting their hands dirty and writing these books, composing this music. So can you speak a little bit about what it takes to change that perception, which I think is the larger message of the book. And that's precisely why I call him the Maverick, because it's a story of will, personal will over destiny.
I think, firstly, I think for my generation, been really grateful because there's a lot more openness of thought. We move past the socialist era of India and all of the different ideologies that came past the 90s. So pretty much by the time I was born, India was opening up to not just the world economy-wise, but overall as well in terms of ideology and perspectives. So I think that has helped a great deal to remove some of these sort of perceptions of what was the colonial era. But I think more importantly than that has been in the case of especially Mysore, we've really never strived to sort of come out and really talk about what that era meant and highlight all of this, the reason why the family has such goodwill within Karnataka and especially the old Mysore region and even in Karnataka.
Yep.
We just sort of went with the flow and let the times dictate whatever we did. So in part, of course, the blame rests on us itself, but also I think collectively the princes were sort of post-independence, we were on the wrong side of everyone, so to speak. So we were caught in the political crossfire because you were essentially an outdated political class which had essentially no role. And so many of the princes, such as my grandfather, who had always sort of been virtuous in his work. As cheesy as that sounds, he was actually followed what his dharma said and went forward with it in his life to whatever aspects he could. It was he was clubbed in with the rest of the princes and the rest of the political turmoil that was happening at the time. And I think as a political class, post the privy purses, all of the struggle that resulted in the abolition of the privy purses, etc., was predictable in many ways. So I suppose that took some time to wear off, and then post that, our continued struggles. As the systems change, the problems seem to remain the same. I think
Right.
that too sort of gave us a look back into the princely era and for what it was. And I think now, as you say, we don't look at things in any binaries, but now delve in deeper to see a lot of the grey matter. And in the grey matter of pre-independent India is where the princes are really. And you will find, of course, there were many who played very much to the stereotype of what you would consider this princess to be. But they were a large majority of whom who really obeyed many of the rules which, Indic civilization had told them to do as rulers. Not just Mysore, if you go to the history, there are many cases of many rulers, small to very large states, doing great deal of good. And I think those stories are something that really needs to be looked into going forward.
Absolutely. The presence of monarchy today and in the past, as always, has never been a monolithic structure. And maybe it's time to re-examine and rethink those prejudices, biases. And finally, we may have the opportunity to celebrate our past and celebrate our legacies.